Hey guys, it's me, the Bearded Wonder, back for some more Cold War action. Today we're going to talk about Berlin. If you remember, we kind of left off a couple times ago with the division of East and West Germany. That's the Potsdam Conference, and we also said that wasn't a mistake that we have kind of that blue, green, and yellow section there in the middle of the red territory. That's the city of Berlin. And both sides kind of wanted to go halvesies on Berlin because it was a cultural center, a kind of big, important city in Germany. The Allies kind of insisted on getting half of it. Stalin probably always assumed that he would just kind of eventually put pressure on West Berlin and get the other half of it. And so we kind of have this problem. And then 1950s, that problem is going to become bigger with something that we call the Berlin Blockade. Basically goes like this: to supply the city, obviously you can't go to the communist grocery store and buy it, so the supplies have to come from West Germany. They were coming on roads that obviously use Soviet-controlled territory. And as long as this situation continues, the West Berliners continue to eat, no problems. So Joseph Stalin decides that he really doesn't like all of these West Berlin people showing everybody what freedom is like and all of those silly concepts, and so he decides he's going to close the roads. After all, nothing says Communist Party like starvation. We've already done it in Ukraine, we've done it in a bunch of other places. Why not do it in Berlin as well? That's going to make all of them good comrades. Well, that's going to be a problem for the people in West Berlin because you're not just food, but any kind of basic supplies that you need: toilet paper, coffee, and even things like gasoline for electricity and other things like that are now scarce or non-existent. And so you're going to need to do something, and you're going to need to do it quick. And so the solution is what we call the Berlin airlift. Basically, if the roads are closed, we need to find a way to supply the city that doesn't use roads. We're going to use planes instead. This is where you have the story of the candy bomber. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. If not, it's a pretty neat story. Guy made a whole bunch of handmade parachutes and spent all of his extra money at the commissary buying little chocolate bars and basically dropped them out of his airplane, which could have gotten him kicked out of the Air Force, except it looked really cool on the newspapers. But anyway, every day hundreds of airplanes would take off from West Germany, and they would just parachute or land a whole bunch of stuff in West Berlin to supply the city. Even to the point where they supplied animals for the zoo by dropping them out of the airplane with parachutes. Well, no, not really. But, you know, other things other than elephants from parachutes for the zoo did have to come by airplane in what we call the Berlin airlift. They started calling it the Sky Bridge as well, because it linked West Germany to West Berlin. Finally, Stalin gets to the point where he realizes that the Berlin blockade isn't working, and so he decides to build a wall instead. And so he builds a big wall around the city, and called the Berlin Wall, to cut them off from the rest of Germany. And so he builds his wall. It's a big, beautiful wall, and the wall is basically to separate West Berlin from the rest of East Germany. The Soviets are more concerned, honestly, about people sneaking into West Berlin than they are about people leaving West Berlin. You'd kind of have to be crazy to flee an area that actually gave you freedom for a place that didn't give you any. And so we have the Berlin Wall. The Berlin Wall kind of becomes symbolic of the Cold War in general. It's definitely symbolic of the Iron Curtain, this idea that East Europe is cut off from the rest of the world. And so the fall of the Berlin Wall at the end of the 1980s is definitely a big symbol of kind of the end of the Cold War. It's not the actual end of the Cold War, but we're going to talk about the fall of the Berlin Wall and the end of the Cold War a little bit later. Anyway, that's about it for us today. The Berlin blockade cut off the city of Berlin. The Berlin airlift to get supplies to the city so they don't have to become communist, and then the building of the Berlin Wall so that nobody can stop being communist by running into West Berlin. Kind of how or the order that those events go. And that's it for today. I hope you have a good day.